I'm sitting here 3 weeks after my 5th anniversary party and I still can't believe what I heard. Actually, that's wrong. I can believe it. Looking back at 5 years of marriage to Amelia, all the little comments and dismissive looks from her family suddenly make perfect sense. But hearing it all laid out so clearly while they laughed and clinked their wine glasses, that was something else. Let me back up. I'm Mitchell, 34 years old, and I thought I had a decent life. Married to Amelia for 5 years, together for 7 total. Her family always seemed a bit cold toward me, but I figured that's just how some families are. Her mother, Pamela, is one of those women who measures success by job titles and country club memberships. Her sister, Stacy, married some finance guy who works 80-hour weeks and probably hasn't had a real conversation with his wife in years. But hey, he makes good money, so that's all that matters to them. The anniversary party was Pamela's idea. She insisted on hosting it at her house because it would be so much nicer than anything you two could put together. Classic Pamela. The whole thing was over the top with catering and a bartender and about 40 people I barely knew. Most of them were Amelia's family friends and her mother's social circle. My parents couldn't make it because they were visiting my sister in Portland, which honestly was probably for the best given how the night turned out. Everything was fine for the first couple hours. I played the good husband, made small talk with Pamela's friends, laughed at her cousin Roland's terrible jokes about marriage. Around 9 o'clock, I needed a break from the noise and the fake smiles, so I stepped out the side door onto the back patio to get some air. The patio wraps around to a side area with these tall hedges, and I walked toward that section because it was quieter. That's when I heard Amelia's voice coming from the other side of the hedges. She was out there with Stacy and Pamela, and I was about to announce myself when I heard what they were saying. Amelia said something about how she just needed to wait a bit longer. 34 years old and still a total loser, she said. Can't even get a promotion after 10 years at the same company. She told them she was just waiting until she could divorce me and take everything. The house, the savings, everything. Her exact words were, "I've put in my time, I deserve something for dealing with his mediocrity." Stacy jumped right in. "You really picked a worthless man, didn't you? Should have married that doctor Mom introduced you to. Remember him? He's probably running his own practice by now. Meanwhile, you're stuck with someone who peaked at 24. Then Pamela added her thoughts. "I told you he'd never amount to anything," she said. "Look at him. Same pathetic job, same pathetic life. When I introduced you to Richard's son, you could have had security, but no. You had to follow your heart or whatever nonsense you told yourself." They all laughed. Actually, laughed. I heard the sound of wine glasses clinking together, and more laughter about how I'd probably cry during the divorce and how I'd have to move back in with my parents like some teenage failure. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes listening to them plan out how Amelia would divorce me. They talked about waiting another year or two so she could claim she really tried to make it work. Stacy mentioned her own divorce lawyer, who was apparently ruthless and would make sure Amelia got everything she deserved. Pamela said something about how the house was the important thing, because real estate in our area keeps going up. Here's what they don't know, and this is where it gets good. That house they were so excited about taking, the one Pamela kept calling the marital home like she was already in court, I inherited it from my grandfather 4 years before I even met Amelia. It's in my name only, always has been. When we got married, my lawyer advised me to keep it that way, and I did. Amelia signed a postnuptial agreement 2 years into our marriage when I refinanced. She doesn't remember because she barely looked at the paperwork, just signed where I showed her because she trusted me. Isn't that ironic? The same pathetic job they love mocking? I'm a senior systems architect. I've gotten 3 promotions in the past 10 years. I make good money, but I don't flash it around because I'm not an idiot. I drive a normal car. I dress normally. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Amelia has access to our joint checking account where my paychecks get deposited, but that's not where all my money goes. I've got separate accounts she's never seen. Retirement accounts, investment accounts, savings accounts that are mine alone. I'm not hiding assets illegally or anything like that. They're just my accounts from before the marriage that I never combined with our joint finances. Want to know the best part? The absolute best part? I knew something was off months ago. Maybe I'm not as stupid as they think. I noticed Amelia getting distant. Noticed how her family looked at me like I was something stuck to their shoe. So I'd already been talking to a lawyer. Not because I wanted a divorce, but because I wanted to understand my position if Amelia ever decided to leave. Turns out my position is pretty solid. The prenup and postnup we have basically protect everything I owned before the marriage and everything I've earned that went into my separate accounts. So I stood there behind those hedges listening to 3 women plan to financially destroy me, and then I walked back inside. I put on the biggest smile. I laughed at Roland's jokes. I made small talk about the catering. And when someone suggested a toast, I volunteered to give one. I raised my glass and looked right at Amelia. I talked about love and trust and partnership. I said marriage was about two people supporting each other through everything life throws at them. I mentioned how grateful I was for a wife who stood by me and believed in me. Pamela got teary. Stacy actually said "aw" out loud. Amelia kissed me in front of everyone. The party ended around midnight. We drove home together and she chatted about how nice everything was. She said her mom really outdid herself with the planning. She talked about how sweet my toast was. I agreed with everything. I was the perfect husband, having the perfect night, celebrating our perfect marriage. That was 3 weeks ago. In those 3 weeks, I've been very busy. Remember that lawyer I mentioned? We've had several long conversations. I've gathered every document related to our finances, the house, everything. I've made copies of every joint account statement. I've reviewed the postnuptial agreement line by line. I've opened a new checking account at a different bank and redirected my paycheck there. The joint account now only gets a small deposit each month for household bills, which I pay anyway. I've also done something else, something that's going to make the next few months very interesting. But I'm not laying all my cards on the table yet because that would be stupid. What I will say is this. Amelia has no idea that I know what she's planning. She thinks I'm the same trusting husband who gave that heartfelt toast. She still kisses me goodbye in the morning and asks about my day in the evening. We have dinner together and watch TV like nothing's wrong. Her family hasn't changed either. Pamela still makes her little comments about how I should be more ambitious. Stacy still talks about her husband's latest business deal like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. They all still look at me like I'm temporary, like I'm just keeping Amelia's seat warm until someone better comes along. But here's what I keep thinking about late at night when Amelia's asleep next to me. They're all so confident, so absolutely sure that they hold all the cards. They think I'm going to be blindsided by divorce papers and left with nothing. They think I'll beg and cry and grovel. They think I'll move back in with my parents and spend the next 10 years trying to rebuild my life. What they don't realize is that I've spent the last 3 weeks putting pieces in place. Legal pieces, financial pieces. Every conversation I have with Amelia now gets remembered. Every expense gets tracked. Every interaction with her family gets noted. Not because I'm doing anything illegal or shady, but because I'm prepared. I've been preparing since that night on the patio and, honestly, it feels good to know exactly where I stand instead of walking around blind. The really interesting part is watching Amelia pretend. She's good at it. She asks me how work is going and I tell her about projects and meetings. She suggests we save money for a vacation and I nod along, while knowing exactly where every dollar is going. She makes plans for next year like we're going to be together forever. Sometimes I almost feel bad for her, but then I remember her laughing with her sister about taking everything from me. Last week, Pamela invited us over for dinner. Just family, she said. Roland and his wife were there, plus Stacy and her finance husband. The whole evening was Pamela asking me pointed questions about my career and whether I'd considered looking for new opportunities. Her way of saying I'm not successful enough. Stacy mentioned that her lawyer friend, who specializes in family law, was looking for referrals, and did we know anyone who might need her services? Amelia actually laughed at that. Said we were happy so we wouldn't be needing any lawyers. I smiled and agreed. Said we were very happy. Said I couldn't imagine my life without Amelia. Roland made a joke about how marriage is life imprisonment without parole. Everyone laughed except me because I was thinking about how many days were left before everything changed. The thing is, I'm not even that angry anymore. Don't get me wrong, I was angry. That first night after the party, I barely slept. I kept replaying their words over and over. But anger isn't useful here. Cold calculation is useful. Planning is useful. Being 3 steps ahead is useful. And right now, I'm definitely ahead of where they think I am. Tomorrow, I have another meeting with my lawyer. We're finalizing some documents, making sure everything is exactly right, making sure that when this all comes out, there are no loose ends they can exploit. My lawyer asked me twice if I was sure about my approach, and both times I said yes. Because I am sure. I listened to my wife and her family laugh about destroying my life, and now I'm making sure that doesn't happen. Amelia keeps asking if everything's okay because apparently I've been distant lately. I tell her work is stressful. She believes it because she wants to believe it. She needs me to stay predictable and passive so her plan works. What she doesn't know is that I've already changed the locks on a future she thought was guaranteed. I'm not ready to show my hand yet. That comes later. But I wanted to write this down somewhere because I'm going to need to remember how this felt. How it felt to hear people you trust talk about you like you're nothing. How it felt to realize your marriage was a lie. How it felt to know that while you were being a good husband, your wife was planning your financial destruction with her family's full support. and how it feels right now, knowing that they have absolutely no idea what's coming. Update will come soon because things are about to get very, very interesting. Update 1. Holy hell, Reddit! The last 4 days have been absolutely insane. I promised you an update once things started moving, and trust me, they are moving. For those who suggested I was being too calm or calculated in my first post, yeah, that was the point. But now the mask is off and everything is happening fast. So last Thursday I came home from work, around 6:30. Amelia was in the kitchen making dinner, like she does every Thursday. We have this routine where Thursdays are her cooking night and she usually makes pasta or something simple. She was chopping vegetables and asked me how my day was. I told her it was productive. Very productive, actually. Then I pulled out the envelope from my laptop bag and set it on the kitchen counter. She looked at it and asked what it was. I told her to open it. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the envelope. I watched her face as she pulled out the divorce petition. Watched her eyes scan the first page. Watched the exact moment she realized what she was looking at. She asked what this was supposed to be. Some kind of joke? I told her no, it wasn't a joke. I was filing for divorce. Just like she'd been planning to do to me, except I decided to go first. She stared at me for a solid 10 seconds before asking what I was talking about. What planning? She had no idea what I meant. That quote. Yes, when I told her I heard everything at the anniversary party. Stood right behind those hedges while she and Stacy and Pamela laughed about how pathetic I was. Heard every word about waiting another year or two. Heard about her taking the house and the savings and leaving me with nothing. Heard about Stacy's ruthless divorce lawyer. All of it. Amelia, quote S face, went completely white. She started shaking her head saying I must have misunderstood, that I was taking things out of context. They were just venting, she said. Just blowing off steam because marriage is hard sometimes. Everyone complains about their spouse. I asked her if everyone plans their spouse's financial destruction in detail while drinking wine and clinking glasses. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her about the post-nuptial agreement she signed 2 years ago when I refinanced the house. Told her the house was mine before we got married and would stay mine after we divorced. Told her about my separate accounts that she'd never seen. Told her that while she was planning to take everything, I'd already made sure she couldn't take anything that was actually mine. She dropped the papers on the counter and started arguing. Said I was being paranoid. Said she loved me and would never do what I was accusing her of. Said her family might be difficult, but they didn't mean anything by their comments. She was crying now and reaching for my arm, trying to make me look at her, trying to convince me I was wrong about what I heard. I pulled my arm away and told her I wasn't wrong. I know what I heard, and I know what she was planning. The only difference between her plan and mine is that I actually followed through. She started yelling then, asking how I could do this to her, how I could throw away 5 years of marriage over one overheard conversation. She said I was destroying our life together because I was too sensitive to handle some family drama. Here, quote, S where it gets interesting. I told her she had 30 days to move out of the house. My house. The one I inherited from my grandfather. She said I couldn't kick her out of her own home. I reminded her it wasn't her home. It was my home that she'd been living in. She could stay in one of the guest rooms until she found a place, but we were done sharing a bedroom. She called me insane. Said I was having some kind of breakdown. Said we needed to go to couples therapy and work through whatever I was going through. I told her the only thing I was going through was a divorce. She could accept that or not, but it was happening either way. Then I went upstairs and moved all my clothes and personal items into the guest room at the end of the hall. She followed me the whole time, begging me to stop, saying we could fix this, saying she was sorry if I misunderstood what she said. Notice how she kept saying if I misunderstood, not I'm sorry for what I said. That night she texted Stacy and Pamela. I know because about an hour after I moved into the guest room, my phone started blowing up. First, Pamela called. I sent it to voicemail. Then Stacy called. Voicemail. Then Pamela again. Then Stacy texted me asking what was going on and could I please call her back. I ignored all of it. Friday morning, Amelia was still trying. She made coffee and brought it to the guest room. Knocked on the door saying she'd made my favorite breakfast. I opened the door and took the coffee, but told her I wasn't hungry. She stood there with this plate of scrambled eggs looking like she might cry again. She asked if we could please just talk. Really talk. I told her we had talked plenty the night before, and nothing had changed. She wanted to know where this was coming from. How could I just wake up one day and decide to end our marriage without even trying to fix it? I reminded her that she was the one who decided to end our marriage. She just wanted to do it on her timeline after extracting maximum financial benefit. All I did was change the timeline. She kept insisting I misunderstood, that she never wanted a divorce, that her family was just being dramatic because that's how they are. I asked her if she really thought I was stupid enough to believe that. She said no. She thought I was smart. which is why she couldn't understand why I was acting like this. Acting like what? I asked. Like someone who overheard his wife planning to destroy him? She said I was twisting everything to fit some narrative I'd created in my head. By Friday afternoon, the family response had escalated. Pamela showed up at the house, just appeared at the door around 3 o'clock demanding to speak with me. Amelia let her in and called up to the guest room saying her mother was here. I came downstairs and Pamela was standing in my living room like she owned the place. She told me we needed to have a serious conversation about my behavior, that Amelia was devastated, and this whole situation was unacceptable. I asked what situation exactly. She said me filing for divorce out of nowhere and kicking Amelia out of her home. I corrected her. My home. This was my home before I married Amelia, and would be my home after I divorced her. Pamela, quote, S face got red. She said I was being childish and cruel. That marriage is about compromise and communication, not running to lawyers the second things get difficult. I told her things got difficult when I heard her daughter planning to divorce me and take everything I own. Pamela froze. She actually froze mid-sentence and her mouth just hung open. Then she said I must have misheard, that I was confused about what was said at the party. I wasn't confused, I told her. I heard everything perfectly. Heard her say I'd never amount to anything. Heard her remind Amelia about that doctor she should have married. Heard her talk about the marital home, like it was already Amelia's property. Heard all three of them laugh about me moving back in with my parents. Every single word was crystal clear. Pamela tried to recover. She said families say things sometimes when they're frustrated, that it didn't mean anything, that I was being oversensitive. I asked if she would be oversensitive if she heard her husband's family planning to take her house and savings while laughing about what a loser she was. She said that was different. I asked how. She didn't answer. Then she shifted tactics, started talking about how much Amelia loved me, how devoted she'd been for 5 years, how I was throwing away a good marriage because of hurt feelings. I told her Amelia had been devoted to waiting for the right moment to divorce me and cash out. That's not love. That's strategy. Pamela said I was being ridiculous, that she was going to talk to Amelia about getting me to see a therapist because clearly I was not thinking rationally. I told her she could talk to Amelia about whatever she wanted, but it wouldn't change anything. The divorce was filed, the terms were set, and unless Amelia wanted to fight me in court over property she had no legal claim to, she'd accept the settlement I was offering and move on. Pamela asked what settlement. I told her to ask her daughter. Then I went back upstairs. Saturday was when Stacy got involved. She came over in the morning with Amelia, and the two of them cornered me in the kitchen. Stacy said she needed me to explain what was happening because from where she stood it looked like I was having some kind of episode. I asked what kind of episode. She said the kind where someone throws away their entire life over nothing. Over nothing? I said. Over nothing? She backtracked. Said that came out wrong. What she meant was that I was overreacting to some comments that were taken out of context. I asked her to explain the context where telling your sister she picked a worthless man isn't insulting. She said she was just supporting Amelia, who'd been venting about normal marriage problems. I asked what normal marriage problems specifically. Stacy got flustered. She said every marriage has issues, communication problems, intimacy problems, career stress. She was rattling off generic stuff, and I just stood there waiting for her to finish. When she stopped talking, I asked if those were the problems Amelia had been venting about. She said yes. I asked Amelia directly if that's what she'd been complaining about. Amelia looked at the floor. Stacy kept pushing. She said I was making this so much bigger than it needed to be, that families talk and sometimes they say things they don't mean, that I should be mature enough to move past this. I told her I was being mature. I was handling this through proper legal channels instead of screaming and throwing things. I was giving Amelia 30 days to find a new place instead of immediately kicking her out. I was being extremely mature about the whole situation. That quote. When Amelia finally spoke up. She said I was punishing her for something she hadn't even done, that I heard her talking about divorce but she never actually filed, never actually cheated, never actually did anything wrong. She was just talking, she said, just processing her feelings with her family. And now I was destroying our marriage over a conversation I shouldn't have even heard. I stared at her. This woman who I'd been married to for 5 years, who I'd trusted completely, who I'd shared everything with. And she genuinely seemed to believe that planning my destruction was fine, as long as she hadn't executed the plan yet. Like I should be grateful she hadn't gotten around to ruining me. I told her that the conversation I shouldn't have heard was the most honest she'd been with me in years. That I finally understood exactly how she and her family saw me. And that understanding was worth more than anything else in our marriage because at least now, I knew the truth. She started crying again. Stacy put her arm around her and glared at me like I was a monster. They left about an hour later. Stacy told me I was making a huge mistake and that I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I told her the only thing I regretted was not seeing this sooner. After they left, Amelia went to her sister's house and didn't come back until Sunday evening. Sunday night, she tried a different approach. She came into the guest room where I was reading and sat on the edge of the bed. She said she'd been thinking all weekend and she understood why I was hurt. That she should have been more careful about what she said around her family. That she could see how it sounded bad without proper context. But she wanted me to understand her perspective too. Her family had always made her feel like she needed to justify her choices. Justify marrying someone who wasn't rich or prestigious or whatever standard they set. And sometimes when they pushed those buttons, she said things she didn't mean just to stop them from judging her. She was protecting herself from their criticism, not actually planning to leave me. I asked if that's why she discussed specific details with them. The timeline of waiting another year, Stacy's ruthless lawyer, taking the house and savings. All of that was just protecting herself from criticism? She said it was more complicated than that I couldn't understand what it was like having a family like hers. Having a mother like Pamela who measured your worth by your husband's success. I told her I absolutely understood. I'd been living with that judgment for 7 years. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time Pamela made a comment about my career or Stacy compared me to her finance husband. I understood perfectly what it was like to be constantly measured and found lacking. The difference was that I didn't handle it by planning to financially destroy anyone. She said that wasn't fair. That she never wanted to hurt me. That she loved me. I asked her when she stopped loving me. She insisted she still did. I asked her if she loved me at the anniversary party when she was laughing about me being a loser. She said she wasn't laughing at me. She was laughing at her mother's comments to keep the peace. I told her the sound of her laughter was pretty clear. From where I stood. Monday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was a lawyer. Not my lawyer. A lawyer named Trent who said he was representing Amelia in the divorce proceedings. He wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss settlement terms. I told him to have his client contact my lawyer and hung up. So Amelia had already hired someone. That was fast. Really fast. Considering she'd spent the entire weekend telling me she wanted to save our marriage. Guess she was done pretending. My lawyer called me 2 hours later. He'd heard from Trent. Apparently Amelia was contesting the post-nuptial agreement, claiming it was signed under duress, claiming she didn't understand what she was signing, claiming I'd pressured her when she was vulnerable. My lawyer asked if any of that was true. I told him no. She signed it when I refinanced the house 2 years ago. We'd been married for 3 years at that point. She read it, asked a couple questions, signed it. No pressure, no duress. Completely voluntary. My lawyer said that was good because we had the notarized document and her signature. But I should be prepared for Amelia's legal team to try every angle. That's what they do. They throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. He asked if I was ready for a fight. I told him I'd been ready since the anniversary party, since I heard exactly what my wife and her family thought of me. Now, it's Monday night, and I'm sitting here in the guest room of my own house while my wife is downstairs, probably calling her family to strategize. Her lawyer has already made contact. She's already trying to challenge the legal protections I put in place. And I'm sure Pamela and Stacy are coaching her on every move. But here's what they still don't understand. I'm not the same person they think I am. I'm not the loser they laughed about. I'm not the failure they plan to exploit. And I'm definitely not the naive husband who's going to roll over and let them take what's mine. This is just the beginning. They want to fight? They're going to get one. And unlike them, I've actually been preparing for this battle instead of just talking about it. Update 2. All right, Reddit. Buckle up because the last week has been absolutely wild. You know how I said Pamela did something that escalated everything? Yeah, I wasn't exaggerating. This woman actually went scorched earth, and honestly, I'm almost impressed by the audacity. So Tuesday afternoon, I was at work in a meeting with my team when my phone started buzzing. Not just 1 or 2 messages, but like 15 in a row. I ignored it because I was presenting a system architecture proposal. But during the break I checked, and it was all text from people I barely talk to. Coworkers I haven't spoken to in months. A guy from my gym. Someone I went to college with who I'm connected with on social media, but never actually message. Every single one of them was asking if I was okay or if the rumors were true or saying they were here if I needed to talk. I had no idea what they were talking about. Then someone sent me a screenshot and everything made sense. Pamela had posted on her social media about how her daughter's marriage was falling apart because of my mental health crisis. That I was having a breakdown and making irrational decisions that were destroying my family. That Amelia was heartbroken and trying to get me help, but I was refusing treatment. She made it sound like I was the one with problems. Like poor Amelia was dealing with an unstable husband who'd suddenly snapped. The post had dozens of comments from her friends offering support and saying how sorry they were. Some of them I recognized because they'd been at the anniversary party. The same people who probably heard her talking trash about me in private were now publicly sympathizing with her about my supposed breakdown. I sat in that conference room reading through the post, and all I could think was how calculated this was. She wasn't just defending Amelia, she was building a narrative, making me look unstable so that when the divorce went through, people would think, oh, that poor woman had to leave her mentally ill husband. Not, oh, that woman got caught planning to destroy her husband and he protected himself. I called my lawyer during lunch, told him what Pamela posted. He asked if she mentioned the divorce specifically or made any false claims about me that were legally actionable. I read him the whole thing. She was careful, didn't say anything explicitly false, just implied a bunch of stuff that made me look bad. My lawyer said we could potentially argue defamation, but it would be hard to prove and might not be worth the effort. Better to focus on the actual divorce case. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to just let this slide. If Pamela wanted to play the public opinion game, then fine. We could play that game. I responded to her post, kept it short and direct, said I appreciated everyone's concern, but there was no mental health crisis. I was simply ending my marriage after overhearing my wife and her family plan my financial destruction at our anniversary party. That was it. No drama, just facts. The comments on my response were immediate. People asking what I meant. People saying that sounded serious. People tagging Pamela asking if this was true. She deleted her original post within an hour. Then she blocked me. But by then, dozens of people had already seen both posts, and the questions were out there. Wednesday morning, Amelia confronted me about it. She was furious. Came into the guest room before I left for work, demanding to know why I would publicly humiliate her mother like that. I asked if she was serious. Her mother posted lies about me having a mental breakdown and I was the one humiliating people. She said I could have handled it privately instead of airing everything on social media. I reminded her that I didn't air anything on social media. Her mother did that. I just corrected the record. If Pamela didn't want people knowing what happened at the anniversary party, maybe she shouldn't have lied about why we were getting divorced. Amelia said I made it sound like she was some kind of villain when all she did was have a private conversation. I asked how private it was with 2 other people on a patio at a party with 40 guests. She said I was twisting everything again, that her mother was trying to protect her and I'd thrown it back in their faces, that everyone in their social circle was now asking questions and gossiping. I told her that's what happens when you lie publicly. People ask questions. Maybe next time her mother should consider telling the truth, or better yet, saying nothing at all. Amelia started crying. She said I was being cruel, that I used to be kind and understanding, and now I was just angry all the time. She wanted to know what happened to the man she married. I told her the man she married found out his wife saw him as a loser and a meal ticket. That man decided to protect himself. She called me cold. I told her I learned from watching her plan my destruction with such calm calculation. The legal stuff ramped up this week too. Thursday, I had to go to my lawyer's office for a deposition prep session. Amelia's lawyer, Trent, was requesting a full financial disclosure, which apparently is standard in divorce cases. My lawyer said we'd comply with everything legally required, but we weren't giving them anything beyond that. He asked me again about the postnup, when it was signed, what the circumstances were, whether Amelia had her own lawyer review it. I told him the truth. We signed it when I refinanced the house 2 years into our marriage. The mortgage company required updated documentation since I was the sole owner. Amelia signed it after reading through it. She asked if she needed a lawyer, and I said that was up to her, but the terms were straightforward. The house remained my separate property. She said she trusted me and signed. No pressure, no threats, no duress. My lawyer made notes, said that was good. The fact that she acknowledged she could get a lawyer but chose not to actually strengthen our position. It showed she made an informed decision. He said Trent was going to argue she didn't understand the implications, but we had a notarized document with her signature, and that carried weight. Then he asked about joint assets. What we had together that needed to be divided. I told him we had the joint checking account, which usually has about $3,000 in it. We had a joint savings account with maybe $8,000. We have 2 cars, but they're both titled to the people who drive them. Mine is in my name, hers is in hers. We don't have kids, so no custody issues. Really, the only complicated part was the house, and the postnup handled that. He said that was cleaner than most divorces he dealt with. Asked if I wanted to offer any kind of settlement to avoid prolonged litigation. I asked what he meant. He said typically in a 5-year marriage with limited joint assets, I might offer a small settlement payment just to close things out quickly. Maybe $10,000 or $15,000 to cover her moving costs and help her get started somewhere new. I thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. Thought about Amelia laughing at that party. Thought about her calling me a loser who'd never amount to anything. Thought about her planning to take everything from me. Then, I told my lawyer, no settlement. She gets half the joint accounts per state law. That's it. Nothing else. He said that was my right, but it might extend the divorce process. I told him I didn't care how long it took. Friday afternoon, Stacy showed up at my house again, this time without Amelia. She came right after I got home from work and she looked stressed. She asked if we could talk and I said sure. We sat in the living room and she laid into me about the social media situation. Said I made Pamela look like a liar in front of all her friends. That their whole social circle was talking about it and asking uncomfortable questions. I asked if maybe Pamela shouldn't have lied then. Stacy said her mother was trying to protect Amelia's reputation. That divorce is hard enough without everyone knowing the messy details. I asked whose fault it was that everyone knew the messy details. She said mine for posting a response. I said no, Pamela's for posting lies first. Stacy switched tactics. She said I needed to think about what this divorce was doing to Amelia emotionally, that her sister was barely eating, that she was stressed and upset and losing weight, that this whole situation was destroying her. I asked if Amelia was this stressed when she was planning to divorce me. Stacy said that was different because Amelia never went through with it. I stared at her, just stared. Because the logic was so twisted, I didn't even know where to start. Amelia planning to divorce me was fine because she didn't execute the plan yet. But me actually filing for divorce was terrible because it upset her. Like the intent didn't matter, only the execution. Stacy asked what I was thinking, and I told her I was thinking about how her entire family has a completely different standard for Amelia than they do for everyone else. She said that wasn't true. I asked if she thought planning someone's financial destruction was acceptable behavior. She said Amelia wasn't planning anything. She was just venting frustrations. I asked at what point does detailed discussion of timeline, lawyers, and asset division stop being venting and start being planning. Stacy didn't answer, just said I was being deliberately difficult. Then she brought up the house. Said it wasn't fair that Amelia had to move out when she'd been living there for 5 years. That it was her home too, regardless of whose name was on the deed. I asked if she understood what property ownership meant. She said she understood that marriage was supposed to be a partnership, that spouses share everything, including homes. I reminded her about the postnup. She said Amelia was fighting that. I know, I told her, and she was going to lose that fight. Because the postnup was legal and valid and signed voluntarily. Stacy said we'd see about that. That Trent was very good at his job and knew how to challenge these kinds of agreements. I told her Trent could be the best lawyer in the state and it wouldn't change the facts. The house was mine, would stay mine, and Amelia had about 3 more weeks to find somewhere else to live. Stacy stood up. She said I'd changed, that I used to be reasonable and now I was just vindictive. I told her I used to be naive and now I was protecting myself. She said there was a difference between protection and punishment. I asked what I was punishing Amelia for. For planning to divorce me? For mocking me with her family? For laughing about taking everything I owned? Or for getting caught before she could do it? Stacy left without answering. Amelia came home about an hour later and went straight to our bedroom. Didn't talk to me. Didn't come out for dinner. Just stayed in there all evening. Around 10 p.m. I heard her on the phone. She was talking to someone about the house. About whether she had any legal right to stay. About whether the postnup could be challenged if she claimed emotional distress when she signed it. I stood outside the bedroom door listening. Yeah, I know how that sounds given how this whole thing started with me overhearing conversations. But this was my house, and I had a right to know what was being planned under my roof. She talked for almost 30 minutes about legal strategies, about whether she could claim the house had become marital property through her contributions, about whether she could argue that I'd promised her the house would be hers too someday. She never promised me the house. Never. We'd never even discussed it. But here she was strategizing with someone about making false claims to try to take what was mine. After everything, she still thought she deserved it. Still thought she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. Saturday morning, I went to the hardware store. Needed to pick up some supplies for a project I was working on. I ran into Roland there. He was buying paint and acted surprised to see me. We made awkward small talk for a minute before he brought up the divorce. Said he'd heard things were getting messy. I said they were about as messy as you'd expect when someone gets caught planning your destruction. Roland looked uncomfortable. He said he didn't know all the details, but he hoped we could work things out. That 5 years was a long time to throw away. I told him it was a long time to spend with someone who saw you as a failure. He asked if I really thought Amelia saw me that way. I asked if he was at the anniversary party. He said yes. I told him then he probably heard some of the same conversations I did. He admitted he'd heard Pamela making comments about my career. Said she does that to everyone, though. Criticizes people to make herself feel superior. I asked if he heard Amelia agreeing with her. Roland hesitated. Then said yes, he'd heard Amelia join in a bit. But families do that sometimes, he said. They gang up and say things they don't mean. I told him I didn't think Amelia meant anything she'd said to me for the past 5 years, but I knew she meant everything she said about me to her family. That was real, that was honest. Everything else was performance. Roland said that seemed harsh. I said it seemed accurate. We finished our conversation and I left. Sunday was quiet. Amelia stayed at Stacy's house all day. I had the place to myself, and honestly, it was the most peaceful day I'd had in 2 weeks. No arguments, no crying, no family members showing up to lecture me. Just me and my house and my thoughts. I kept thinking about Pamela's social media post, about how quickly she'd tried to control the narrative, about how the whole family was circling wagons around Amelia like she was the victim here. And I realized that's how they see it. To them, I'm the bad guy, the unstable husband who ruined everything. Because in their world, men like me are supposed to accept whatever treatment we get. We're supposed to be grateful for wives like Amelia who could have done better. That's what this has always been about. Not love, not partnership, but settling. Amelia settled for me, and her family never let her forget it. Never let me forget it. Every comment about my career, every comparison to Stacy's husband, every mention of the doctor Pamela wanted her to marry, it was all reminding us both that I wasn't good enough. Well, guess what? I'm done trying to be good enough for people who will never see my worth. I'm done making myself smaller so they can feel superior. And I'm definitely done letting them profit from my property while calling me a loser behind my back. Monday morning, I got an email from my lawyer. Trent had submitted a formal request for temporary spousal support while the divorce was pending. Amelia was claiming she couldn't afford to move out or support herself during the separation, that she needed financial assistance from me until the divorce was finalized. She was asking for $4,000 a month, $4,000, to support herself for a few months while we waited for the divorce to process. I make good money, but that's not nothing. That's a significant amount. And she wanted it because apparently 5 years of marriage entitled her to my continued financial support, even though she was the one who wanted to leave me in the first place. My lawyer asked how I wanted to respond. I told him to fight it. Amelia has a job. She works part-time doing administrative stuff for a friend's small business. She makes enough to cover basic expenses. She has access to half our joint accounts, which is several $1,000s. She has her car. She has no kids to support. There was no reason she needed $4,000 a month from me. He said he'd file a response. Said these requests are common in divorces, but given the short marriage and her employment, the judge probably wouldn't grant it. Probably. Not definitely. Which meant there was a chance I'd be ordered to pay my wife $4,000 a month, so she could afford to move out of my house after planning to take it from me. Today is Monday night. Amelia still hasn't come home. I'm sitting here in my house that I inherited from my grandfather. My house that Pamela called the marital home, like it belonged to her daughter. My house that Amelia thought she could take in a divorce. And I'm realizing this is just the beginning. They're going to fight dirty. Pamela's social media post was just the opening move. Trent requesting temporary support is another tactic. And I'm sure there's more coming. Stacy will probably try to convince our mutual friends I'm unstable. Pamela will spread more rumors. Amelia will play the victim everywhere she goes. But here's what they keep forgetting. I heard them at their worst. I heard them laugh about destroying me. I heard the truth about how they see me. And you can't unhear something like that. You can't go back to trusting people who think so little of you. So let them fight dirty. Let them try every tactic their lawyers can think of. Let them turn their social circle against me. None of it changes the facts. The house is mine. The separate accounts are mine. And the post-nup protects everything that matters. They wanted to take everything from me. Well, now they get nothing. And they have only themselves to blame. Final update. Reddit. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and the divorce was finalized 3 days ago. I'm sitting here in my house with the final decree in front of me, and I need to tell you how this all played out because it's been a journey. So after my last update, things accelerated fast. The temporary spousal support request went before a judge 2 weeks after Trent filed it. My lawyer and I showed up to the hearing, and Amelia was there with Trent looking like she'd been through hell. She'd definitely lost weight like Stacy said. She looked tired. Part of me almost felt bad until I remembered why we were there in the first place. Trent argued that Amelia needed $4,000 a month to maintain the standard of living she'd become accustomed to during our marriage, that she'd given up career opportunities to support me, that she deserved financial assistance during this difficult transition. My lawyer countered with her actual employment history showing she'd worked part-time by choice, showed her access to joint accounts, showed that she had no dependents and no extraordinary expenses. The judge asked Amelia directly why she couldn't support herself on her current income plus savings. She said the money in the joint accounts wouldn't last long, and her part-time job only covered basic expenses. The judge asked why she couldn't work full-time. Amelia said she was too emotionally distressed to take on more responsibility right now. The judge looked at her for a long moment and then denied the request. Denied it. Completely. Said there was insufficient evidence that Amelia couldn't support herself during the relatively short dissolution period. Trent tried to argue, but the judge shut it down. Said we'd revisit it if circumstances changed, but for now, no temporary support. I watched Amelia's face just crumble. She'd been so confident that she'd get that money. So sure the judge would see her as the victim who needed protection. Outside the courthouse, Amelia tried to talk to me. She asked if I was happy now. If seeing her struggle was what I wanted. I told her I didn't want her to struggle. I wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet like an adult instead of expecting me to fund her life after she planned to destroy mine. She said I was being unfair. That I made good money and $4,000 a month wouldn't have hurt me. I asked if she thought I was stupid enough to pay someone who laughed about taking everything from me. She started crying right there in the parking lot. She said she was sorry about what happened at the party. That she never meant for me to hear any of it. That she was just venting and it got out of hand. I told her I was sorry too. Sorry I'd wasted 5 years on someone who saw me as a meal ticket. Sorry I'd trusted her family. Sorry I'd ever thought we had a real marriage instead of a transaction that hadn't benefited me yet. Trent pulled her away before she could respond. Told her they'd discuss next steps. As they walked to his car, I heard him telling her they needed to focus on challenging the post-nuptial agreement. That was their best shot at getting her anything substantial. She asked if he thought they could win that fight. He said they'd try, but he needed her to really think about the circumstances when she signed it. Whether there was any pressure or coercion she could remember. The post-nup hearing happened a week later. This was the big one. The one that determined whether Amelia had any claim to my house. Trent brought in Amelia to testify about signing the agreement. She said she'd been pressured, that I'd told her the refinancing wouldn't go through unless she signed, that she'd been worried about our financial future, so she signed even though she didn't really understand what it meant. My lawyer destroyed her testimony. He showed the actual refinancing documents proving I could have completed the process without her signature on the post-nup. Showed emails from that time period where Amelia talked about being excited about the refinancing, giving us better interest rates. Showed the notary's statement that Amelia had appeared lucid and willing when she signed. Showed that I'd specifically asked if she wanted a lawyer to review it, and she'd declined in writing. Trent tried to argue that Amelia had been vulnerable. That 2 years into a marriage, she'd trusted me, and I'd taken advantage of that trust. My lawyer asked if trust meant Amelia had been incapable of reading a legal document. If trust meant she couldn't ask questions or seek counsel. If trust meant she bore no responsibility for her own signature on a notarized agreement. The judge asked Amelia directly if she'd read the post-nup before signing. She hesitated, then admitted she'd skimmed it but trusted me to handle the details. The judge asked if I'd prevented her from reading it thoroughly. She said no. The judge asked if I'd refused to answer her questions. She said no, she just hadn't asked many questions because she thought it was standard paperwork for the refinancing. The judge upheld the post-nuptial agreement, said there was no evidence of duress or coercion, that Amelia had signed voluntarily after being given the opportunity to review the document and seek legal counsel, that her decision to trust her husband rather than independently verify the terms did not constitute grounds for invalidation. The house remained my separate property. Not marital property, not subject to division, mine. Amelia left that hearing in tears. Pamela had shown up to support her and she was furious. She cornered me in the hallway and demanded to know how I could do this to her daughter, how I could leave Amelia with nothing after 5 years of marriage. I reminded her that Amelia wasn't getting nothing. She was getting half of our joint accounts like the law required. Pamela said that wasn't enough to start over. I asked if it was enough when they thought I'd be the one starting over with nothing. Pamela went pale. She hadn't expected me to bring that up directly. She tried to recover, saying they'd never actually planned to leave me with nothing, that I was exaggerating what I'd heard. I asked her to explain what part I exaggerated. The part where Amelia called me a loser? The part where Stacy said I was worthless? The part where they all laughed about me moving back in with my parents? Which specific part did I get wrong? She couldn't answer. Just stood there with her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words. Finally, she said I was being vindictive and cruel. That her daughter loved me and I was punishing her for one mistake. I told her the mistake wasn't the conversation at the party. The mistake was thinking I was too stupid to protect myself. The final divorce hearing was last week. By that point, most of the details were settled. I kept the house. I kept my separate accounts. We split the joint accounts 50-50, which gave her about $5,000 total. She kept her car. I kept mine. No spousal support. No alimony. Clean break. The judge asked if we both agreed to the terms. My lawyer confirmed. Trent said yes, but Amelia asked if she could make a statement. The judge allowed it. Amelia stood up and said she wanted me to know she really had loved me, that the conversation at the party didn't represent her true feelings, that she'd been influenced by her family's expectations and said things she didn't mean, that she wished we could have worked things out instead of ending like this, that she hoped someday I could forgive her. The judge asked if I wanted to respond. I said no. There was nothing to say. The judge finalized the divorce. Just like that. 5 years of marriage dissolved in about 20 minutes of paperwork and procedure. Amelia was crying. Pamela was glaring at me. Stacy had shown up too and she looked angry. I felt nothing, just relief that it was over. Amelia had to move out by the end of that week. She'd been staying mostly at Stacy's house anyway, so she didn't have much at my place. She came by on Wednesday to get her remaining belongings. I was there because my lawyer advised me to be present when she collected her things. She went through the house room by room packing up clothes and personal items. She kept looking at everything like she was trying to memorize it. In the bedroom, she stopped in front of a photo of us from our wedding. She asked if she could keep it. I said she could take whatever photos she wanted. She packed it carefully and then asked if I really thought she never loved me. I told her I thought she loved the idea of what I could become, what I could provide. But she never loved who I actually was. She said that wasn't true, but she didn't elaborate. Before she left, she told me she was moving into a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom. Nothing fancy. She'd used most of her money from the joint account for first and last month's rent plus deposit. She'd picked up more hours at work, but money was going to be tight for a while. She said all this like she expected me to offer help. I didn't. Just told her good luck with the new place. She asked one more time if there was any chance we could ever be friends. If after everything settled, maybe we could get coffee and talk. I asked her why she'd want that. She said because we'd spent 5 years together and that had to mean something. I told her it meant I now knew exactly what happened when people saw you as less than, when families measured worth by salary and status, when marriages were arrangements instead of partnerships. She started crying again and left. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've had time to process everything. The divorce is final. The house is mine. My finances are protected. Amelia is gone. Her family can't touch me anymore. And I'm sitting here realizing that what I built over these past 2 months wasn't just a legal defense. It was proof that I was never the person they thought I was. The loser they laughed about? He was a senior systems architect who'd been strategic enough to protect his assets years before any conflict started. The failure who couldn't get promoted? He'd gotten 3 promotions in 10 years and made more than enough to live comfortably. The pathetic man with the same pathetic life? He'd been building a future while they'd been building nothing but assumptions and arrogance. Here's what Amelia and her family never understood. They measured success by showing off, by flash and status and impressing other people. I measured it by security, by protecting what was mine, by being prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. They thought I was weak because I didn't perform for them. They thought I was failing because I didn't meet their arbitrary standards. But when everything fell apart, I was the one who had lawyers and documentation and legal protections ready to go. I was the one who understood exactly what I owned and what I didn't. I was the one who'd been paying attention all along while they were busy congratulating themselves on being superior. The truth is, I heard everything at that anniversary party and I was angry. I'm still angry. But the anger turned into something useful. It turned into action, into preparation, into making absolutely sure that when they tried to take everything I'd worked for, they'd fail. And they did fail. Spectacularly. Amelia ended up with $5,000 and an apartment she can barely afford. Pamela's social circle knows the truth about what was said at that party. Stacy's ruthless lawyer friend couldn't do anything against a valid post-nuptial agreement. Everything they planned crashed and burned because they underestimated someone they dismissed as not worth their time. I ran into Roland at the grocery store yesterday. He asked how I was doing after everything. I told him I was doing great. Better than I'd been in years, actually. He said that was good to hear and mentioned he'd talked to Amelia recently. She told him she was having a hard time adjusting to living alone, having to budget carefully, having to work full-time. Roland said it with this tone, like he expected me to feel guilty. I asked him if he remembered what I'd said about hearing her at the party. He said yes. I asked if he thought someone who planned to take everything from their spouse deserved sympathy when they ended up with almost nothing. He said everyone deserves some sympathy. I told him maybe he was right, but I was fresh out after 5 years of being looked down on by people who thought they were better than me. The thing is, Reddit, I'm not celebrating Amelia's struggles. I'm not happy she's having a hard time, but I'm not sorry about it either. She made choices. Her family made choices. They decided I was someone they could use and discard. They decided my feelings and my property were less important than their plans. And when I protected myself, they acted like I was the villain. So here's what they learned too late. That toast I gave at the anniversary party about love and trust and partnership, I meant every word when I said it. I believed in all of that. But the second I heard them laughing about destroying me, everything changed. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally saw the truth about what my marriage actually was. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to being the trusting husband who doesn't question his wife's motives. You can't pretend that people who call you a loser in private respect you in public. You can't build a life with someone who's planning your destruction. What I built instead was protection. Legal protection, financial protection, emotional protection. I built walls they couldn't climb and barriers they couldn't break. And now I'm sitting in my house that they wanted to take, with my accounts they wanted to empty, living my life they wanted to ruin. Not because I'm cruel or vindictive, but because I refused to be the victim they expected me to be. Amelia and her family wanted everything. They got nothing. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when you underestimate someone and they prove you wrong. 3 weeks after that party, I promised them they'd regret what they said. They do. And I'm done caring about their regrets.